we are talking about
Okay,
the.
I have just started recording. We need an intro. Hello, hello, and welcome. I put the name Ludo Philosophy on it because the game Philosopher was already taken, but Ludo Philosophy basically means the same thing. That's it. I'm calling that the intro. What are we talking about today?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. So,
We good? What
today we're
happened?
talking about. Yeah, I don't worry about it. We're
Okay.
good. Um, so today we're talking about Ludo, or we're talking about the Magic Circle here on Ludo Philosophy. Uh, you're the expert. Can you explain what the Magic Circle is?
Um, as much as anyone can be told what the no. Yeah. So basically, it's a pretty good place to start discussions of games because the idea is that the Magic Circle is an imaginary border within which games take place, where basically anything that takes place inside of the game has no effect on the outcomes of real life. It's very much like the way that, like, when we play games, we're playing pretend, where it is practice for real life. What happens in a game ultimately doesn't truly matter to a grander life, other than, whatever things you learn from coming away from the game with, because play is learning. That's another basic idea.
Right. And I think we thought this was an interesting topic because the uh, especially with more metaverse games, more uh, as games become a daily thing in our lives, I think the question becomes where is that line between games as pure games and uh, games that affect real life?
Yeah, and like, I don't know, I've always taken it as one of those sort of reverse defined things where it's just like, okay, if it affects real life, then it's not really a game. Like, that's where
Right.
we get into conversations about sports. Or I think there are people out there who will say sports are not games, or like sports are something separate from games. And I do think that this is uh pretty much anytime you start playing a game competitively and there are stakes, there's something on the line, at that point it stops becoming a game and either becomes a sport or becomes something else.
Would you say it's kind of like Bill Clinton in porn? Like, I know it when I see it.
um First of all, I don't think that was Bill Clinton. Second of all, no, I think there
Someone else
are.
would have said that.
It was like a Senate committee hearing, I think, because they were trying to. I wasn't that around, like, it was something in media and like redefining like what is, standards and practices, and like, okay, what counts as pornographic material, and it's just like I can't define it, but I'll know it when I see it. um
Yeah.
but I feel like games used to be that, and sort of the Magic Circle is when we were like, no, actually we've looked at it enough and we have found a strong enough reoccurring pattern that now we can put a sort of definition on it. And it's like, like, I don't know if you want to talk about games in like a basic way. You talk about like schoolyard games, right? Like if you're just having
Yeah.
a game of, like, pick up football, right? That's something we used to do at recess or whatever. It's like, okay, who
Yeah.
wins or loses the game doesn't really matter, right?
Yep. So what would be your definition of like a pure game?
Oh boy. I am a really like strict definitionist on what is games. Um
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
yeah, that's why you asked, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh Basically, I am the kind of person who says that a game is a system, in the sense that it is a set of rules that interacts with each other and define certain available behaviors and actions. Um and that it has an ending. There is one or more states where it has concluded and it ends. Um, generally you think of win and lose states, but basketball, eventually the timer runs out. Like I don't think, but or you look at something like Pac-Man, right? Like that game kind of loops forever, but eventually you will die, and you're another thing about games is there's often a metric,
Mhm.
something being measured in some form. You look at it like points, because if you look at Pac-Man as a game, because you play it, theoretically it could go on forever, but there is an ending point. There is a termination point, and there are points, which is a metric by which you can be compared against others who have played the game, right? That is sort of my, and basically when
Would
you
Pac-Man,
when you sorry, go
yeah,
on.
would Pac-Man be your example for like an ideal game? For like a pure game? You there?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that it's. Hey, you want to just like turn on cameras just for our consideration?
Sure.
Uh,
Sounds good.
I could do that on Discord. No, it's gonna share that. Okay, hang on, I can fix this. Um, I'm going to put this. And now that goes, and hey, now I'm on in Discord. How's that? That's better. And there you are. Good. Okay. Um, edit point. Say again. What was the question?
Yeah, like what would be your example? If you had to pick like a good example of what you think is a pure game.
Uh, pure game. Um, maybe like
That would be like, yeah.
it's like something schoolyardish, right? Because so a
Tag
game,
maybe?
yeah, like something like tag, because there
Yeah.
is play, but play can take a lot of form, and very definitive to play is it is free form. Like you can just like, so there are a lot of games where like games that have like a sandbox mode where you just get to test things out. That is playing
Yeah.
within the system, a system designed for a game, but you're not necessarily engaging with the fullness of the game. Like when you boil it down, like I think sort of the primal ooh, but like when you think of like a pure game, the first one that comes to mind to me is chess, but that is really just like
Mhm.
like a very boiled down example of a game, but that is not
Yeah.
necessarily the most minimal thing a game could be, right? Um,
Yeah. So would you say that like, so you said something schoolyardish, would you say like Calvin Ball would be a good example of like a pure game?
um,
I guess basically what I'm getting at is like, is it pure game something that you are doing um for fun?
no, games do not have to be for fun.
Okay.
That's an interesting question there. Um,
Okay.
so it is like like to completely boil it down, like if you have tennis, but you take away the net and the rackets, you have a really weird game of catch, and I feel like that could
Sure.
be like the most pure game you have. It's basically like I'm gonna throw it at you, you're gonna throw it at me. If one of us drops it, then the other person gets a point. First to 4 points wins, right?
Okay.
That to me feels like a very pure, like a the most minimal a game could be in a certain way.
Okay. So on the other end, like what is the thing that is popularly considered a game that in this that you wouldn't consider a game?
Okay, but that's kind of a weird question because like a lot of things are called games, and I think because
Yeah.
we do not have like vernacular that really is well versed enough to consider the distinguishes between things that are like there are a lot of things
Well, that's
that
what we're trying to do here, right?
well,
We're
that's
trying
what
to come up with
yeah.
vernacular. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because that's the thing, right? Like there are, I see it a lot in the indie game space. There's a lot of indie games. Um,
Sure are.
well, I mean, okay, so a thing where this discussion really happened for a while was in the quote unquote walking simulator space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what was the big one there? Uh,
There were a couple. I think Edith Finch was one.
yeah,
Life is Strange was another.
yeah.
Um, but what do you mean? Would you consider those games or not?
I don't necessarily consider those games,
Okay.
because there is a certain non-linear, non-concreteness to quote unquote pure games because it
Hmm.
is like again you look at something like Pac-Man. A game could end on the first level. A game could end because the person falls asleep because they were going infinitely and just literally couldn't physically stand it anymore, right? So there's
Hmm.
this concept of that, the idea of like an interactive narrative, like this will go until the game you have seen the completeness of the story. Like I think those are sort of like, I think they often get called games because the not necessarily the medium but like the tools that we use to interact with them are the same. Like
Yeah.
pretty much people say like anything you interact with using WASD and a mouse and like
Sure.
has an inventory, let's say, like anything like that could be games. But I think a lot what was that Dragon Cancer, I think is maybe a really good one. Like that is kind of an adventure game, but kind of
Mhm.
it just it's a weird one because you can't fail it, right? Like you can fail
Yeah.
to move forward, but you can't really fail it, and you are going to end at the exact same spot that everybody else ends. It is an experience that you can complete, but you do not necessarily have you do not necessarily have agency over the outcome in any way, right? Like even you look at something like Mass Effect, right? Like Mass Effect, the triangle design of like branching narrative. It's like, okay, yeah, everyone got kind of upset because the game came down to everyone got the exact same three color choice no matter what they did. But you
Yeah.
can look at it that like in the course of that full playthrough, there can be unique combinations of experiences that did end in the same place, but the path there was different. So players are able to have agency. I think that that is a thing about it. Like, um, I have heard a definition that I liked of games is that games are a series of interesting choices, which to
Hmm.
me says that to have a choice, you need to be able to make a choice, which means you need to have a sense of agency. So anything where
Right.
you do not have agency is not a game per se. Um,
Yeah.
and so the weird exception to that rule is
Always a weird exception.
well,
Always. Gotta
again,
be.
like I said, this is. I'm sure a lot of people are going to say this is a very tired argument that they don't want to hear discussed anymore. But we're here for the discussion. The discussion is the
Oh,
fun part. Um,
yes.
that's our tagline. the the choice to play or stop playing a game.
Hmm.
I do not consider that a part of the game, right? Because kind of going back to the magic circle, it's like to choose to play the game is to choose to step into the magic circle, and everything that happens within there is the game. But the choice to enter or leave the magic circle, to begin or stop engaging with the game, that is a transition point between the real life and the game. And because
Okay.
it involves real life, it is not purely a part of the game. It is your it is not a part of a game to choose to stop playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. What about something like a good game of Dungeons and Dragons that can help people work through some real life problems that they're having.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that this happens every session, but I think it's almost kind of baked into the formula that you can design the character, play act as a character, and it'll reveal things to you about yourself. So that would be an example of a game having real world effects, right? So where do you think that falls within this philosophy?
So I that is an effect of that is a result of engaging with the game, not of the outcome of the game, right? Um,
So it's separate from the mechanics, you're saying?
well, to me that falls into the same, like it may be baked in, but it feels to me like, the more chess you play, eventually you get better at playing with chess, at playing chess, right? Like, so you gain skills, so that is technically a real world repercussion. But like,
Not in my case, but I understand what
sure,
you're saying.
but yeah, exactly the thing. Like changes to the person, like leaving with knowledge, like that is a weird sort of like edge case. But I think the way
Yeah.
to make it sort of process through is you look at it as that is a that is a change in the person caused by engaging with the game. The magic circle is more about um whether anything happens as a result of the outcome of the game.
Okay. So I think where we're leading to here is a discussion on esports, right? Because they have cash prizes, because they have maybe higher stakes than a normal game of that game, right? Would you consider League of Legends the esport or Street Fighter the esport to be a game?
No, because again, at that point there's something on the line that will have, lasting repercussions based on the outcome of the game, in the person's life outside of that game. And that is
Right.
we don't say, oh, this game, or like you might say this game has however much money on the line, but then when you talk about that, it's like, no, this is sport now, like it's called e-sport, like that's even, like, again, that is the difference between a pickup game of football on the playground and the NFL,
Mhm.
right? Is at some point it's
Yeah.
like, okay, it's whoever is proven to be the best. Because, again, in mine, I do think that there is some sort of like, I don't think it is necessary for games to have a metric. You can have a game that doesn't track points, but
Yeah.
pretty much any game that does have metrics in it is a game where you can compare against other people. And as soon as you can compare against other people and you can rank, then you can say, okay, uh here is a stake that we're going to put on the rankings, right? Um,
Right. So you would almost say that there's a difference between the circle of games and then the circle of competitions, if that makes sense.
yes, that's well. So again, uh, it matters of other state. Like I think you could make three definitions because there is um something with stakes on it. You can
Right.
have a competition with no stakes, but does consider the sort of comparison of players, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. All games are, well, most games are competitions, but not all competitions are games. Is essentially what I'm getting at.
you see, I was gonna go the other way. I was gonna say all competitions are
Okay.
games, but not all games,
Okay.
because like you even you look at that recess football. If you
Yeah.
don't keep track of points, then you do not have the metric by which to rank anybody. So that cannot be a competition. If you start keeping track of points, but the end metrics have no repercussions because there are no stakes. It's a competition, but it's still a game because the results of that competition doesn't matter. But as soon as it's like, okay, whoever gets the most points gets free lunch. Now it's not a game anymore because the result of the competition have real world stakes, you know?
Okay. Okay. Hmm.
Playing Magic and, not and there is a little fuzziness to that, right? Because at
Yeah,
some
yeah,
point,
yeah.
like, to play a game without keeping track of score, a lot of times this is going to cause the game to you're going to sort of negate the end condition of the system, because like if it's first to 5 points, but then if you don't, or if you're playing a
Mm,
game of Magic and it's first to 0 points loses, but if you don't keep track of life and you just kind of play forever, then it does kind of stop being a game and start being sort of a sandbox. It is pure
yeah.
play at that point, because
Do you
you
think do you think people tend to, when they come to a game or when they're playing a game, they will put stakes into it? Like, let's say we're playing a game of tag, right? And I start to put a lot of myself into that game of tag. I'm like, I want to win this game of tag. I want to be better than all my friends at tag. Uh, is it still a game to me at that point? Because the
so
stakes for me at that point are real, but they're not financial, they're emotional.
yeah.
Right.
And I think you're exactly right on that. I think at that see and that becomes kind of an interesting thing, because at that point you and the other people playing are not playing the same game, because when you play there's stakes on it, when they play there's no stakes on it. So I think, when you see that play out in real life, and I think we see it all the time, that's where we get, the one kid who is taking it way too seriously and ends up ruining the fun of the game for everybody else, because what they're trying to do is they are trying to play something, more, I guess, like stressful than a game. Like they're not playing a game
Right.
anymore. They're
They're
they're taking it too seriously. Like we
right.
back to the I know when I'll see it. Like I think we do all have the like, yo, it's just
Yeah.
a game, or no, or like, don't take it so seriously. Like I think that is sort of the I know it when I'll see it version, that the idea of the magic circle and looking at stakes is sort of codifying into definitions.
Right. I guess at that point you're not even like you're not playing the game, it's about your priorities. Your priority isn't having fun with your friends, your priority is beating people. Your priority is winning
Yeah.
instead of playing the game.
Well, actually, I think
Is
tell me what you think of this. The idea of
yeah.
the the Venn diagram of playing and competing as verbs,
Mhm.
right? Like because there's a thing, the idea that play is a technique of learning, right? Um
Sure.
because it is, you are going in, you are testing. There's included in play is when you go, well, let's see what happens, and there's a
Mhm.
finding out, there's practicing, there's learning. When you are competing, you are going in with a mindset where you are not willing to do something for the sake of learning. You are only putting the sort of the metrics and the results on as the top priority. Like if we're just playing, I will do something goofy to find out what happens. But if we are competing, I will do what I understand to be the like most winning focused actions, right?
Right. I think that that's because if you want to get good at competition, you
Mm-hmm.
have to learn a lot about the game you're playing. So you have to play it a lot before you compete.
Right.
Um, and I almost think of it like, uh, you know, the play part of it, the learning part of it is practice, and then come game day, you're competing, right? And you have to set aside that part of your mind that's like, all right, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna learn. I'm going to analyze my play. I'm going to try to gain things from each round of play, and like no, you're just there to compete. You're just there to like win. You're just there to like uh to to beat the opponents,
Yeah, and like
and you'll analyze it afterwards, right?
yeah, or like some small scale of learning is just like, okay, this specific matchup, this is how this dude has been playing in his earlier brackets,
Right,
so here's things that I
right.
should look for going in. Like, so there is this element of it's like learning, but even then you're not playing. It is more learning through study, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And actually, like, there's this really interesting thing that happens amongst competitive players. Like, they go on tilt, they'll make a bad play, and then it'll affect their play for the rest of the tournament or the rest of the session,
Hmm.
right? Um, because they're trying to learn from that play that they misplayed or
Right.
whatever, they're distracted and they're angry and they're emotional for the rest of the time they're playing.
Yeah.
So actually, like when you're in competition, trying to learn and trying to play can be a detriment. Not always, right? There are people who are like, oh, like I made a misplay and like they have like 5 minutes between matches and they'll try to analyze it. But like a lot of the time it's detrimental.
Right. Another way I think of looking at it is some people say that uh the magic circle is another way of saying that the game is a space where it is safe to lose, right? Um,
Hmm.
which is just another way
I
of
think
saying
that
that there's no stakes. But it is
yeah,
this element of like it's okay to lose because exactly that. Like when you're testing stuff, sometimes you lose in learning, sometimes you win in
right.
learning. Um, but if it's safe to lose, then that means that it is exactly that. It is a space where it is safe to learn. You're just willing
Yep.
to risk losing for the sake of learning. So losing is safe. So if it is not safe to lose, then it is not a game anymore, right?
I
Um,
really like that. I really like that definition. That feels very, very accurate to me.
and kind of
Um,
easy to pick out. Like so,
yeah, yeah.
uh, we
Really
we
easy to rock.
we started to touch on this before we started recording, but when I was in school for this stuff, I did a thesis on trying to gamify schools and the education system.
Hmm.
And the short answer I came down to was like this in order to gamify school, it would have to be safe to fail, and like there's too much of the current system that basically works on the idea of pass or fail a grade, and like
Yep.
it's too much would have to change to make it functionally possible to change it. Like we could not change the system to gamify it. We would have to rebuild it in a safe to fail system because failing in school could either be, well, either A, I'm going to get left behind a grade, or B,
Mhm.
I'm going to be forced forward without an understanding and you're just going to have cascading failures. um
I think it should be okay to fail in schools,
oh, absolutely.
to some
So
extent. But
I mean that it goes entirely with what we've been saying in the last couple of minutes, because
yeah,
the idea is that in order for it to be safe to learn, in order to encourage learning, it needs to be safe to fail. Like that's exactly the
right.
thing. Like you look at standardized testing, and the safer play when it comes to standardized testing is getting the answers than learning the content, right?
Yep.
Like it like the our education system is not built to encourage learning. That's a whole thing, but that is kind of
Yep.
the status of it.
I don't wanna I think that's a little bit more in depth than we have time for here.
Yeah, that can be a whole separate
I
day.
have a lot yeah, I have a lot I wanna say on that. But I wanna get into, you're familiar with, flow states?
Yes.
Um, what do you think? Because when you're trying to compete for something, and I was a competitive Magic player for many more years than I should have been, um, like, you get into these flow states when you're in competition, where nothing else is on your mind and you're just playing the game, right?
Mhm.
So what do you think of that in the context of the magic circle? Do you think it can be is there a way to enter a flow state within that magic circle, or if you've entered the flow state, you are beyond the pale?
It's kind of weird to think about flow state in terms of the magic circle because I look at the magic circle as being a matter of like the boundaries of a system and cause and events in, the greater web of your life, whereas flow
Yeah.
state I look at more as s- almost a chemical question because it is
Mhm.
about it's exactly what you were saying. Like it is part of it is definitely practice because I think in order to achieve a flow state you need to like be at a point where you're not learning anything because then I guess as you put it you're not distracted by the learning and it's just like yep this is happening now, this is happening now, and like nothing is surprising you or confusing you at that point. It is sort
Yeah.
of like the kind of like road hypnosis, like things are happening and they are under
Yep.
control and we're just following the steps that are muscle memory at this point. But it is also that like if you are um like honestly I can never get into a flow state when I'm competing because the stress of knowing I'm competing is always a distraction and always keeps me off my mind. But that is something
Yep.
very like subjective to me, and I think that is I've been working out in therapy. I have pretty severe generalized anxiety. It turns out.
Yeah.
Especially around social stuff. So being in a group of people that I'm being compared to is absolutely going to send it off the scales.
Yeah.
Um, but like that's the thing, like whether or not you're able to attain a flow state has way more to do with, let's say, how well you slept last night or how long you've been awake versus anything to do with the nature of the system and
Okay.
and any stakes set upon it,
So
right?
you wouldn't consider that like a change in reality that violates the magic circle then?
No, it is
Okay.
I think it is. I would guess that it is easier to achieve within the magic circle, but
Okay.
I think it is totally independent. Like it's funny in game design. One of the things we were sort of taught is that like a lot of times what people try to do is they try to design the game system in order to sort of evoke a flow state, but
Interesting.
honestly I really think like oh no, if you want your players to achieve a flow state more interestedly, just put a joint in the game box.
Mhm.
I feel like
That'll do it.
I really feel like that is sort of a the truth about it is like there are some things that
Yeah.
but I'm also in a very specific location to be like oh no, yeah, some things about psychology are based on emotions which are based on chemicals as much as they are on
Right.
actual like perception and mental processing. So
Sure. On that note, I think we have to wrap up. My computer is about to die.
okay. That's
So
a good
I
reason to wrap
think
up.
it's pretty yeah, it's a pretty good stopping point. Do you have any final notes you wanna give before we sign off?
Uh, no, just kind of that this is a good subject. I think it is a pretty good baseline for like beginning discussions about games and does get a bunch of definitions out of the way. But it's also something
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's going to probably come up again and again because again, as we're talking about like it is a thing that always is a point of discussion that always comes up, especially when we talk about games and their role in society and friend groups and culture. Because even today, you'll hear people talk about like, oh, there's a difference between playing a game of football and playing the sport of football, and like that has nothing to do with video games at that point, but it is kind of the same discussion.
Yep. Makes sense. Alright. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Until next time, I am Shabby Shambles.
I'm Nick, and we'll figure out everything else later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Alright.
Okay.